Hi there, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Vice President of Solution Strategy. I want to thank everyone out there for joining us today. I'm just thrilled to have as my guest today, Patrick McCarthy from SAP. He's the SVP and General Manager of SAP Ariba. Patrick, thanks for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Where are you calling from today, Patrick?
I'm in beautiful Chicago, Illinois today.
All right. It's probably too early for snow, right?
Thankfully, yes. We've got a little bit more time before we get
All right. Yep, here in Boise, it's 75 today, so we're getting that Indian summer here as well.
Great.
So again, Patrick, thanks for joining us. SAP Ariba to me is one of the most interesting areas of SAP. Early in my career, I was involved in a lot of supply chain kinds of things and procurement and EDI and Swift. All these kinds of things I think kind of surround what you're doing there. But before we get into the details of SAP Ariba, Patrick, let's try to paint a picture. How did companies operate before there were cloud procurement platforms in place? What kinds of work was involved in creating a contract and then sending the paperwork back and forth? Just walk us through how the world worked before cloud-based procurement.
Sure. Yeah, I think I started in supply chain and procurement also. I worked for PepsiCo, and I can tell you what we used to do when I was in a plant. I used to just buy what I wanted to buy. And so that was very problematic for companies because I'd enter into all different kinds of agreements. I was a business person trying to run my business. So, what that obviously meant is that in the old days, supply chain and procurement practices were incredibly fragmented. You had a lot of rogue spend. You had spend that was not consolidated for broader good or for broader purposes. You had people entering into all kinds of contractual agreements. And because it wasn't a core competence of a lot of these business owners, it wasn't something that was at the top of their list. They had businesses to run, and so they were going to do what was required in order to make that happen.
So that sounds like job security for a lot of different positions, because if the individual left, nobody would know what was put in place.
What was going on? There were a lot of inefficiencies across that. And so, striking the balance between giving flexibility to those end users and allowing them to move at the speed and the pace that they want to move at, and simultaneously making sure that we're able to scale that, gain global advantage of that. That's really been the transformation that businesses have been going through.
Wow, that's brilliant. I can remember sitting in conference rooms with the team in our supply chain and the manufacturing team and saying, we want to engage in just-in-time manufacturing and just-in-time inventory. Yeah. So here's the spreadsheets we'll use. And I looked at that and went, now, wait a minute. If we have to use spreadsheets, how can that be just-in-time and It was crazy. And the only person that knew how to do those spreadsheets and where they resided in the system was on somebody's desktop. And if they went on vacation, it was problematic.
Yeah, Dave knew. Yeah, Dave knew. And when Dave left, that all that intellectual property left with Dave.
Yeah. That's crazy. So now in that era, when you didn't have everything on a platform and in a system, there was a lot of non-standard practices, as we just talked about. Some people were using spreadsheets, other people EDI, other people variations of XML and data exchanges and things like that. What kind of inefficiencies did you guys with your cloud-based procurement process have? What kind of inefficiencies did you guys get rid of by standardizing all these things?
Yeah, well, I think there's a big story here around the end-to-end process of source to settle. When that is fragmented, you lose a lot of productivity. And I'll talk about a couple different things that are going on here. But if you can imagine this digital thread that connects, third-party due diligence before a supplier is even allowed to be a supplier in your organization to the actual sourcing down through the settlement, this beautiful singular digital thread gives an organization the opportunity to not only optimize and maximize each step, like consolidate all my sourcing and all of my spend, and so that I'm directing it to not only the right suppliers, but the kinds of suppliers I want to have, ensuring that I have a single repository for all my contractual agreements so that I understand what my liability and my obligations are, and simultaneously so I can judge my supplier's performance against that contractual agreement, making it super simple and easy for those end users to procure the goods that they want, this consumer grade experience, so that they use the procurement solution not because they have to use it, but because they want to use that solution. And then finally, and probably most importantly, when it comes down to actually paying the supplier, we know what we should be paying the supplier given the level of performance from that supplier, and we can ensure and guarantee that it is actually matched up against our contractual rate. So this efficiency of this digital thread end to end is a big part of what cloud-based procurement platforms are driving for their organization. And at each step of the way, delivering the right tools for that end user community to make sure that they can not only do the kinds of things they need to do to perform their task, but they have a great end user experience while they're doing those things.
Wow, I see that as removing blind spots up and down the whole supply chain. Any time when there was a lack of visibility or a lack of accountability, you guys have now built that into that common thread. And I can also see that that's how you can really create the intelligent enterprise, isn't it? When you have that data from end to end and you can look at everything and know what's working and what's not, and then you can use machine learning and artificial intelligence around the edges when you have that data to actually streamline things further. And that goes back to what Bill McDermott was talking about at Sapphire this year about the whole intelligent enterprise, isn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And Bill actually talks about, when he speaks about Ariba, sometimes he'll say the intelligent economy. And even take it one step further, because we're really reaching outside of the four walls of the enterprise. When you get to 2.1 trillion of commerce or 3.7 million suppliers that are connected to the network, you're talking about, the ability to drive economic insights that can protect, manage, and give businesses competitive advantage. And the thing that you said there that I really believe is true is this digital thread, or this single view, and applying machine learning and AI to it. Our own experience in that area is when we started to investigate, several years ago, where do AI and machine learning fit in? What we found was, in the singular use case around contracts, that was interesting and there was value there. In the singular use case around invoicing, that was interesting and there was value there. But when we were able to apply those capabilities to the end-to-end process, was exponential benefit and exponential value that we were able to expose for the customers. And so going back to this, what SAP has always really been known about is looking at the problems and the process end to end, and then finding ways to extract, differentiated value across that process. That's what I'm really excited when we talk specifically about AI and ML across the source to settle business process.
Oh, that's so interesting. Now, one of the things you just talked about there, you mentioned networks. So one of the kind of selling points of SAP Ariba there is that you have the world's largest business network connected. What is significant about that, and where is the value realized by customers?
Yeah, I think there's three things that I'll talk about. And you mentioned EDI previously, so let's just start with that. A network is about real-time integration of businesses. EDI was a way to integrate businesses, but it wasn't real time. And you know this if you've worked in EDI. In most customers, EDI is batched up for a day. Then we send it over to our supplier or to our customer. Then it gets unpacked. Then the errors get found. And all of a sudden, 3 or 4 or 5 days later, what happened on Monday is recognized on Thursday in the organization you sent that to. What we talk about in a network is real-time connectivity. What's happening in your operation and what's happening in your business can be shared on demand with the people that need to know about it. So that in and of itself is a huge advantage that a network provides. The second thing about the size of the network that we talked about, imagine if you were, I'll give the simple example. Imagine you landed in the airport, you opened up your Uber application, and there was nobody there to give you a ride. That's right. Why size matters in a network. This idea that we've got 3.7 million suppliers that are there to respond to your request. So as you globalize your business, as you move into new geographies, as you look for resiliency in your supply chain. I have my preferred supplier, but what's my backup plan, and what's my backup plan to my backup to my tsunami plan? Like, what are all those things? Where am I going to find those suppliers? You cannot do that in a phone book in the modern economy. And the last one is being able to find those new and economically advantaged sources of supply, not just finding new suppliers, but actually finding suppliers that can do and operate at a lower cost and maybe at a higher performance level than what you might have been used to. And I have this great story I tell about a chemicals customer that had this active ingredient they used in their products, and they were 100% sure there were no other sources of supply other than the plant that burned down that was 3 miles down the road. Lo and behold, they hopped onto the Ariba network, they found a supplier in Brazil that even in a fully loaded cost comparison was half the price of the location that was just a few miles down the road. And so procurement professionals are always challenged to find savings. That's just one simple example of what a real network can bring to an organization.
Wow, you mentioned Uber, and Uber is always held up as one of those new business models that are disruptive. But when I was reading through the content on your website about SAP Ariba, it says the whole SAP Ariba enables new types of business models. Yeah. Can you tell us what that means and give us some examples?
Yeah, so going back to this idea about contracts being able to be pay for performance types of scenarios. And so just real literally, if you have invoicing tied to transactional or operational procurement tied to the contract and to the sourcing event, you can get far more creative in your supply side agreements with your supplier, because a contract actually becomes a living and breathing document and is able to assess performance in real time for your supplier. And also additionally, new types of business models for the suppliers themselves. And so when we think about the network and when we think about historical procurement, we're thinking of just the procurement of goods and services, but actually suppliers need all kinds of new and innovative services, right? So suppliers in China need financing to complete that purchase order. Maybe it's 2 levels down in your business model, but actually being able to plug banks into our network so they can look at and say, hey, this is verified demand for company B, so I'm willing to offer loans to the supplier 2 tiers down in their supply chain because I can actually see that it's verified demand. And then finally, for businesses as they're customer facing, tapping into our 3.7 million suppliers to be able to assemble on demand all of the kind of resources they need to be able to go off and tackle. So they may not actually be selling the services for installing their material, but they can tap into the Ariba network to direct our service providers through their contracts to deliver the service side by side with their good. So this network gives us the ability to combine on demand to deliver all different types of new business models.
Oh man, everything about that to me is fascinating. So marketing, I mean, this is when I think of network marketing, man, what bigger network can you have for marketing SAP Ariba? How do you promote SAP Ariba?
Yeah, well, I mean, expanding the suppliers on the network is pretty straightforward. Every minute that we talk here, another supplier joins the network. So 365 days a year, every single minute that we continue to talk, another supplier joins the network. And a big reason why so many suppliers are joining the network is I mentioned how the buyers, the companies that license the applications of Ariba, are looking for new sources of supply. We provided $60 billion in leads to suppliers last year.
Oh, that's crazy numbers, Patrick.
We didn't even ask for it. So just being part of the network and getting on there, and our supplier, our customers looking for new sources of supply, going out there, giving opportunities for these new suppliers. And in fact, to make the story really local, my neighbor wasn't on the Ariba network. He works for a window hardware manufacturing company. I told him, you've got to get onto the network. 2 weeks later, they were bidding for work with the client that they have never met before. They met that client on the Ariba network. And so people want to be where commerce is being transacted. Both buyers and sellers want to be in locations where actions are happening at global scale. That's the real attraction of the Ariba network.
You know, this just sends me backwards in time to 1998 during the whole .com era when everybody out there was dreaming of the network effect. I remember the likes of Commerce One and all kinds of different hubs, right, that were going to start and try to be that. Ariba was there as well and survived and now dominates. So it's fun to see the actual effect of that network.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that's changed and transformed is a lot of those networks tended to be one-sided. They were to benefit one party. And Ariba's perspective is that we have two groups of customers. We have a group of customers that are the buyers, and we have a group of customers that are the sellers. And we have people and parts of our organization that are focused on driving value for both. And I think that's, a foundational tenet around why Ariba has done so well, why Ariba has a network and an ecosystem of the size that it is today.
So do you guys have a sales force that goes out and talks to people about this? How does that work?
Yeah, on both sides. So obviously we're talking to large customers that are looking to procure better, that are looking to optimize their source to settle business processes. And then we have a very large supplier side organization. When you have 3.7 million suppliers, you've got to have a team of some size that's helping them market themselves, understanding how to position themselves in the marketplace, understanding how to get their catalogs and their other content that buyers want to see, and engage in a really digital way for a modern experience for those people that are looking to buy.
Oh, that's so fun. So who are they talking to? Who in the companies on both sides are kind of your target profile of who you want to talk to?
Yeah, so on the buy side, we're talking to the CPO and the CFO, and now also the Senior Vice President of Supply Chain. And the reason I say now the Senior Vice President of Supply Chain is that Ariba had been historically about indirect materials and services. But, about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, we expanded into the direct material side. And so now we cover all physical good movement and purchasing for a company, and that's of interest to a CPO, a CFO, and a COO or SVP of supply chain. And then on the seller side, we're talking to their selling teams, and we're also talking to their accounts receivable and the other folks that are involved in billing and getting paid, because there's a ton of efficiency for the transactional side. And then the sales teams really like it because their cost of sale goes down and the stickiness of the customer goes up. And so they know that as soon as that customer starts to buy off of their catalogs, or as soon as they're engaging in a fully electronic way, their share and the stickiness and the cost to serve of that customer goes down. So it's a real three-way win for the sellers.
No, thank you for sharing that. That's such interesting insight that we would only get from somebody that's on the inside like you. So, Patrick, you've been involved in the go-to-market strategy and the sales side and the marketing side of this product. How have you seen the digital transformation wave actually impact your sales and marketing organization internally there at SAP?
Yeah, I think, for one, the user experience is so important, and we have, really focused on, are we providing a consumer-grade user experience? And, we have a solution that's called guided buying that for transactional procurement, which is the largest purchasing population inside of a company. We've gone from 0 users of that solution because it was brand new 2 years ago to just over 2 million users of that solution. And so it's this massive user population, and we know we got the user experience right. You can't get to 2 million users of a solution unless you do get the user experience right. So I'm super excited about what digital transformation has done for that group, where their 9 to 5 work life feels just like their 5 to 9 home life. So there's no difference in the experience they have in their in the office solution versus in the home solutions. The second one is this time visibility and just how the pace of things has changed. And so this digital transformation, companies cannot wait for batch processing anywhere in their cycle. And so that's the other thing that we're really seeing is the speed, the velocity, and the flexibility that customers need in their supply chain is really dominating the conversations that we had.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Let's get even more tactical. Let's talk about content.
Sure.
So in your job over the last, let's just say 3 years, 36 months, how have consumers and your target markets actually changed their behaviors and the way they consume content? Did they used to, did you used to have long form white papers up that explained everything and people were willing to watch it, and now they've switched to podcasts and video, or how have you seen content consumption change?
Well, I mean, the person that's actually doing the evaluation is far more knowledgeable, even in the last 3 years. So much publicly available content is to the end user, and they wait to engage organizations until they feel like they really have a grip or a grasp. And so what that means for us as an organization is that we have to be a lot deeper in our content. So we spend a lot of time not only talking about our solution, but I just had University of Tennessee professor come on and talk to the team about modern practices and strategic sourcing. What are tactics that customers are using in operational procurement? We really need to be experts, not only in our technology, but in business processes. So that would be number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, people do still want long form white papers, but not in the volume or not at the pace that we've done previously. They do want shorter snippets, and they want us to understand them better and be able to kind of digest that out. And so you cannot just flip content to somebody and say it's on page 75 of a 118-page deck. You really need to be able to customize and personalize that content for that end user, because they're not going to take 45 minutes to work their way through it themselves, the pace of their business and their life. So to put that down, we're doing podcasts. I do something called Pat Chats, which are procurement and technology chats with CPOs. I release one every month. I don't talk anything about technology. I only talk about business and what's happening in business and what's their experience in business and where do they think business is going. And I share that with my team, and they're really internally focused, so that, again, that they're more prepared and aware and able to engage in a very relevant business-based conversation with buyers and suppliers.
Wow. So you just mentioned your Pat Chat. Where do you think cloud-based procurement's going over the next 3 years? What's coming down the road toward us?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this idea of continuing to drive process efficiency by applying machine learning and AI is going to, I think that's a very obvious one. I think blockchain is going to continue to influence, private business relationships for exchange of information and tracking of goods and services as they happen, whether it's co-manufacturing in life sciences or even in industrial machinery and component. That's going to become an even bigger part of what goes on today. I think what's going to happen in the network is going to continue to expand in the kinds of things that happen over the network, not just a PO and an invoice, but financing, quality, third-party inspections, all of this information and these processes that are part of the source to settle business process but are happening outside of it today are going to continue to get wed in there. And so you're going to start to see more and more kinds of capabilities be built into the network. And then once we can see all of that, the opportunity to optimize that at a real scale. So if I'm a life sciences manufacturer and I need to see not only my supplier, but my supplier's supplier and my supplier's 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 supplier, end-tier visibility, and I want to optimize that, that's where I think the network is going to really drive some exponential capabilities for clients.
Wow, and I can see that's a convergence also of the Internet of Things, where you do have visibility into the location of various supplies and materials. And I remember working on this big project when I was focused on enterprise mobility, where we would follow cattle from hoof to shelf. So we knew exactly where they came from, what other cattle, cows were they with in a herd. So if that one had a disease, the others could be tracked. Oh man. And all of that can be done through RFID and through Internet of Things and sensors and all of that, which could feed right into that visibility of the entire supply chain.
Yeah, and this idea that you mentioned there about, I think there's something else along those lines about purpose. I think businesses, we talk a lot about the chief procurement officer becoming the chief purpose officer. And it's 2018, and it seems crazy that we're talking about slavery in supply chains, or conflict minerals in supply chains, or child labor in supply chains, but those things are happening. And organizations need to be able to put the controls and the visibility and the insights to make sure that they're doing good in the world and not doing harm, and that they can procure items and goods at a reasonable cost, but not at the expense of someone else around the world. And this idea of networks and applications and just the desire to do those right things in the world, I think is really, really an exciting aspect of what's going on in the source to settle space right now.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I can see an incredible amount of application for that, from diamonds to oil to, all of that, so that the network can actually be a force for good.
That's right.
So with that, Patrick, that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, your experiences with all of us.
Kevin, great to speak with you, and thanks everybody for joining today.
Yes, and thank you out there, everyone.